symmetry lesson on portals. Yesterday we did portals moving from space to space. Yesterday I was inspired by that and wanted to show you a few other methods of teleporting, and so I built this little VR show, which really started to turn into a game. I kind of enjoyed the mechanic enough to want to go a little further. I'm Max Harper with Simmetri, and I've got this a little koala world here. I don't know what the symbolism of the koala is, but I felt like koalas in the foreground, midground, and background made for a little bit of a space here. Let me show you what this looks like. I'm in VR. I'm in VR mode up here. So Steam VR is running. I'm using the Vive today. I am going to go into VR mode here and just show you kind of what I set up. Having fun with this for a moment yesterday. So I've got these two boxes here, and if I throw something into one, it will come out the other one. But I can also send myself through them. And so there are these portals that if I go into one of them, I will come out the other one. And I actually had put the koala in the exact same position on these so that it almost would trick you. But I thought it helps a little bit visually to see that you've gone from one to the other, like so. But my original intention was to get you to land in the exact spot and make these things look identical, so you didn't realize you'd gone from one to the other. The other thing I did is I made these grabbable under the interactions grabbable fixed, so you could actually fly them to different positions, which I thought would be kind of fun to have kind of this system where you could send yourself choose where you set up these portals, and you can teleport back and forth to those locations. Really cool. You can see how you could easily start imagining where you could go from here. Obviously, you could teleport using yesterday's lessons to different spaces. That would be day 10. I believe we are day 11 here of 30 days of symmetry. So anyway, yeah. So you could imagine teleporting from this space to another space, but right now you could also imagine many different boxes. You could also imagine different, potentially that, I could come into this box from a couple different sides, and potentially the side that I came into would choose which box I ended up going to, and you could build up a puzzle world pretty quickly. And yeah, so I immediately decided that this puzzle world, this little puzzle example, I wanted to kind of experience it. So I built this script, and we're not going to actually do this script today, this force field that I can't penetrate. We're not going to actually go into that today, but it's pretty cool. It basically, when my hand crosses this trigger plane, and this isn't this is like another plane, just a texture that I have, kind of a alpha layered, like a translucent texture that's pink and kind of looks like a force field. But there's a trigger, one of those spatial triggers we've been working with this week here, that says if the thing that crosses this is my left hand, which I'm using to fly, it says, hey, go turn off the ability to fly, so I can't point past here and fly. I can move this across my head, and I can get my head a little further, but my hand can no longer fly once it's crossed. And then when it exits this side, it turns back on. So it's on, I can fly, it comes over here, it's off. But we're not going to actually, I'll leave you maybe to investigate how you might do that, but we'll probably learn that in a later lesson. You could probably use other techniques to challenge yourself to get from one place to another as well. But in this case, I've set this world up to enable this situation, where I can actually move the object through my wall, but I can't go through the wall. And then I set this up to be able to fly through, and now I have flown across the other side. Come over here. Very simple goal stated. So there you go. The basic idea of a teleportable box that you can grab and move. We're going to build up to this. We're going to kind of check out what it's like to just teleport on a basic level inside of your location, inside of one space, and then kind of set up this box system. I'm going to exit VR mode for the moment and just do a little demonstration while in this same space. I'm going to do a demonstration where I'm basically going to fly the camera through one trigger and then send it to be somewhere else. So as an example, let me put a place where my trigger is going to live in space. And then what I'm going to do is so I've created two boxes, and I'm going to create a place where I want them to jump to. I'll just make these green or something. And I'm gonna fly through the gray ones. Actually, let's make them a little bit more expressive. I'll fly through the kind of these pink ones, and I will teleport to the green ones. And the way that I'm going to do that is with a spatial trigger. I'm going to use a plane, and I can actually kind of, now that I've got these two surfaces, I can actually just draw directly onto them, and they're going to kind of give me this. They're going to give me this plane that I have to cross in order to go across these boxes. Whenever I'm working with triggers and I've got some objects nearby them that I don't want to trip the triggers, just in case they get moved or whatever, I sometimes will just come to them and I'll get rid of their trigger activating. I want the trigger activating to be on my camera, but I don't want the trigger activating to be on these like inanimate objects that are going to be near triggers. I don't know if I'm going to come across these, but you can't batch remove it. You have to remove them one at a time. So this is a simple situation. So I'm flying around my camera, right? So that's this guy. That's default camera, and you can see as I fly, you'll see my transform. You can see my position in X, Y, and Z changing. And the one that's changing the most is my Z dimension, so I must be flying along the Z axis, right? So anyway, so as I fly, basically when I cross this trigger, I want to tell my camera, I want to give my camera a new position instantaneously. So at that one moment, right as I cross, I want my camera into a new position. So the way that's going to work is, first of all, I need to make sure that my camera will activate the trigger, and indeed I have already put trigger activating on it. But with a new camera, you're going to find it like this. You're going to go to your default camera, and you're going to select this add attribute, the little triangle and the circle button here next to default camera, and you're going to add trigger activating. Great. Which now means my camera will trigger this plane. And again, when you're in present mode, I'm going to have to deactivate my VR rig here. I will do it actually in playtime. When you fly through here, and when you're in the VR rig, this is what we're going to do for you, but we'll just demonstrate it with the camera. When you fly through here, you are going to get jumped over to where the green is. And to make that more obvious, let me add one more entity. I'll put a sphere kind of right there. So the sphere will be directly in front of you when you get jumped to this position. So how do I know where this position is in space? I can actually, I could kind of like measure it from like looking at this object, and I would say, oh, it's basically at like 50, 2.6, and 28. So it's the vector 3 of 50, 50.7, 2.6, and 28.0. But it's kind of not. It's kind of out in this direction. So instead of trying to look at this and look at this and get measure its location, what I'm actually going to do is just use an empty what's called node. There's no volume to this node. It's just an empty object, and it just it has a transform, so it has a position in space, and it's just like putting a point, like there's no mesh, just a point in space, which is great because it just lives out there. And if I want the camera to go to exactly this location, I just need to figure out what its transform is, and then just tell the camera to go to that position in script. So let's say that this is exactly where I want to be. I'll take the camera, and we'll start off by placing this node on the ground, which means that you can see it intersecting the ground. But if you wanted to be smarter than that, you could come here. Oops, excuse me, that was silly. And make sure that it's 0. Its y was at 0. Wow, how did I just nailed that directly at 0. So if its y is at 0, it'll be right on the ground. You can also click Move on Terrain. Actually, and you'll move at that same y height. So anyway, if I just want it to be at exact 0 on the y, I can like double click right here, or just set 0 to y to 0. And so let's say that's the point that we want our camera to jump to when we come through the trigger. Now all we need to do is get a hold of that point and find its location, and then tell our camera to go there. So let's edit our trigger script. And we're going to select the trigger. Then we're going to right-click on, we can right-click on it in the space, or come up to this icon and hit Edit Code. Excuse me. Let me just make sure that my on enter pops up. So let's do that. Let's go to on enter. Don't right-click this script. That one's won't do it until you've got something in there. But you can also right-click in the space and hit Edit Code. When it's fresh, you'll hit Edit on enter. So here is when we enter, and by the way, remember that the arrows pointing into the trigger mean that this is the enter direction. So this direction is enter, this direction is exit. And you can tell by these arrows, they're coming from the enter direction. Okay, so when we enter, we're going to do the code, we're going to run the code that's in here. So let's see. The first thing we want to do is figure out where we're headed. We're going to go over to node 3. So let's find node 3 in our hierarchy, or we can grab it from the space. We just want to get it selected so that we can come up to properties and take its icon and drag it into our script window. So there we go. We've got node 3 in here, and let's just declare a variable. So like node 3 pos is equal to, and we're going to get the location, the position, get world position. Again, that's lowercase g, uppercase W, uppercase P, get world position, and that's going to return a vector 3. Just so you can see it, print to string node 3 pos. You should see it print out down here. When I come through, my trigger activating camera triggers this thing, and it gives me the position of node 3. Very cool. So now we just need to use that data that we just grabbed and set our camera's position to that. All right, so I'm clicking on the trigger in the space, right click, and hitting edit code, and we're back to our on enter script here. So we just printed. We no longer need to print, but I'll just leave it there. So I'm commenting it out with 2 hyphens, and that means it won't run and won't happen. So we just got we now know what node 3 pos is. So let's say the camera. We need to get a hold of the camera. We could either grab the icon from the default camera and bring it into the script, or we also know that the camera, with its trigger activating attribute, is the thing that tripped the trigger, which means that it's now represented by obj, because this is what the trigger function passes in as an argument. It says, hey, I'm the trigger, this is the thing that just entered, and what do you want to do with the thing that entered? And in our case, we know that we want the behavior we want is for that camera to jump to the node 3 pos. So let's basically use obj, which now is referring to our camera, obj colon set, not get world position, but set lowercase s world capital P position, and then open close parentheses and get inside those parentheses. You can put any amount of spaces in here, it doesn't matter. I like to open up space, especially to help people see this in a tutorial. Now we basically can set it directly to node 3 pos. Node 3 pos is a vector 3, and this set world position needs a vector 3. You can't just take 3 numbers. It won't take 3 numbers unless you type them in this fashion, vector 3, and pass in node numbers. So let me delete that. But node 3 pos is a vector. Note the get world position returns a vector, so we can just drop it straight in here. And let's see if this works. So our camera should jump to the position of that point, because we're going to set the world position of obj, which is the camera, because it flew through this thing. Here we go. Flying, flying, flying. And there we go. We jumped to node 3 pos. And let's see that again. You'll note that my camera stayed there in stop time. One of the preferences that you can set in Simmetri under editor is this enable undo for director camera movement. So this, if I have it selected, it'll take me back to the place my camera was when I press play. So check it out. I'm in front of the pink. I'm going to press play. And I jump through the trigger and I bounce to this location over here. And I fly through. And if I hit stop, I come back to this position. I prefer under preferences to not do that. I generally don't do that. In this case, it might be kind of helpful, but I tend to kind of want to end up where I end up. Something feels kind of normal about that to me. You notice I'm getting bounced over to the side or something, like there's this little stutter. Well, the camera, on playtime, the camera can't penetrate the terrain. It doesn't go through the ground. It actually bounces off of objects with rigid bodies. So it tries not to. You'll notice that in that the camera, when you fly it around, doesn't penetrate objects. So I think what's happening is that I'm telling it to go into the ground, and the camera's getting like bounced out from this position. And I would expect that to be the case because you don't want your camera to be intersecting with the ground usually. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to raise this node, this position where I'm going to warp to, up into the air a little bit. And let's see if that changes things. So I'm going to hit stop. Oops. I moved that in playtime, and I forgot to commit the transform. Show that to you again. I moved it while in playtime. I hit stop, and it went back. If I want that to stay during stop time, I need to commit that transform using Control T or edit commit transform change. It says, hey, you changed something during playtime. Do you want it to stay that way? And so this is your option to say, yeah, I meant to do that. Control T, and I'll put that there. Obviously, if I move it in stop time, it just stays there. So move things in stop time, but if you move them in playtime or pause time, you need to commit the transform changes with Control T. Okay, so we're going to now fly to node 3 and see if there's no bounce, because node 3 is now up in the air and we're not colliding with the terrain. I'm holding down Control right button and then Control to kind of pivot around a point. Sometimes I can get more distance more quickly. All right, let's press play. We're going to fly through the trigger, and we don't really bounce in this case. We just kind of landed at node 3. So let's do that one more time. And we jump right into this location. So that's not bad. What if I don't want my horizon to jump? Like if I fly through this like really high in the air. So let's say I fly through this like way up here. and I want to be basically like kind of more like up here in this new location. Well, I need to basically preserve like an offset, in essence. Like I need to know how far I am from some kind of, central location. Like even if I just want the height to be the same, I could potentially ask myself, well, how high am I off the ground over here when I come through? I want to be exactly that height off the ground over here. So we're going to change this up. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say node 3 is going to like represent where I want my camera to go in the X and Z along the ground plane, but I want to set the camera's height when it jumps to a new position in the air. Like I want it to be relatively the same height as when it came in. I want it to be essentially the exact same height as when it comes into the red trigger. So how can I do that? Well, let's just do a little bit of math and figure out how that can happen. So I now have node 3 living at 0 on the Y, on the ground, and I have it kind of dead center between the green with respect to X and back with respect to Z. So let's take a look. What I'm going to do in here in the code is basically say, well, I don't want to set the object's world position to exactly node 3 position. I need node 3 position plus some amount in the upward direction. So I can go some amount in the upward direction. So I'm going to think about plus, and then there's some like upward amount that I need to know. So what is that upward amount? Well, I want it to be the amount that the camera is currently up in the air. Oh, I can get that. Just like we got the node 3's world position, I can get the camera's world position. So I could say cam, like I could say cam pos equals camera, or no, sorry, camera is being represented by obj because it's the one thing, it's the thing coming through the trigger. So I'm going to say obj colon get world position, and then that'll give me a vector 3. But if I want just the amount in the y direction, what I need is I need to know a y direction of this. So how much of this is in y? So this is really easy when you have a vector 3. So I could call campos y. That's the amount of that camera's position in the y direction. I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to say that it's basically campos, because now this is the vector 3 of the position. Campos can be is a vector 3, and I have one of the components of that vector I can access through the dot operator, and I can say y. So the position in the y is equal to the campos dot y, and what that means is that I have this one number in the y direction. And so like let's print this value. Print campos dot y, and it's a good habit to use toString This is a function that makes this a string, that makes it printable. And so now it's a number that gets converted to a string and is now printed. And let's get rid of this plus sign and let's just fly through here and see what we see. So I'm 4.2 meters. We just printed it off. I'm 4.27 meters in the y direction. So let's think about how we can use that information. Basically, this vector 3, if I'm going to do math with it, like if I'm going to add another vector, if I'm going to add like an upwards amount in the y direction, I need to add it to another vector 3. I can't just add like 1 to it. I don't think we would function well with that. Let me come back here. I don't think 1 is going to do anything. That should throw an error. Yeah. See, it literally says vector 3 is expected. I'm going to hit escape. I can't add a single dimensional vector or a number here to this vector. I need to add another vector to it. So I need to convert this only up in the y direction to a vector, which is really quite simple. So I'm going to use the vector 3 kind of composer function here, and I'm going to say nothing in the 0, and then in the y direction we're going to use what? We're going to use cam pos y, and then in the z direction we're going to say 0. So now I move my camera to the new position, the node 3 position, and then also up in a y direction. So we basically jump it over to node 3, and then we go up in the y direction at exactly the cam pos y, which again was cam pos y was created by figuring out the camera's position when it goes through the trigger, just taking the y component of that, and then basically not adding any x or z to it, and then we end up with this nice set of numbers which we throw into this little vector function, which means that we can add it, and now we've got the node pos and a vertical cam pos, and then we set the camera's position to this overall amount, and we should then get a slightly smoother entrance flying. So fly up here, and yes, I do jump forward, but I do not but I don't jump, I don't end up going down. So if I was down here, I'm jumped into this down position, so it's more smooth. Whoops. Again, not bad. I'm noticing that, for example, these things, this node could come back a little bit. By the time I get there, I'm like already kind of past that zone, and maybe it's nice to or maybe it should go the other way. So I can move that node, and I keep going to a new location wherever node is. And so I could actually take node and place it over there and fly through my thing. So now this node is pretty special. That little node right there becomes this, oops, flew right into the ball because it's right there. The node then becomes this, place. It's now this place in the world. This is the end result location of my my teleportation. And so what I was demonstrating with these boxes is basically, a box which I can actually pick up and move. So like a node that you can grab and move, that also has a teleport connected to it. So that's what this box is basically. It's kind of the trigger side of things that causes the teleportation, and then its partner, it's the other box. So like koala box and not koala box. Koala box has one of these teleporters in it that sends you to not koala box, and not koala box has one that sends you to koala box, and each one is grabbable so that you can kind of throw them around. We're doing something slightly different in here, which is interesting on these boxes, but as an example, I could put. So the idea that you can move this node, the destination of your warp around, is pretty cool. And so now all you really need to do is find a way to make this thing movable. Put it on some object that you can grab and kind of move around, like these boxes, and or a sphere that you can kind of throw, and yeah. So that's a really interesting, kind of and simple, basic way to get kind of a teleportation to happen. And you would do the same thing for the VR rig, and like for example, and the VR rig is only just a slight bit different, right? So let's understand how the VR rig is just a slight bit different, and here's the main reason why the VR rig is a little bit different. Let's take a look at our code here on this trigger. The thing that entered is called OBJ. that was the camera in our case. Remember, our default camera has this trigger activating node, and it's the thing that trips this trigger, which runs this code. And the end result of running that code is sending object to a new location. So, interesting. So OBJ doesn't have to be the camera. It actually could be anything, which is interesting because watch, if I, during this, if I like make, let's make not a node. Let me make a, if I make a box, it's sending anything through here. See? Not sure that was kind of fast. So any object I create, when it goes through that trigger, pops out over at node, our destination. So I could put it right here. Draw a box. And it comes over here. So when the VR rig comes through, I tend to want to set it up in this way, where let's reactivate our VR rig. The VR rig, I have set the trigger activating to the HMD camera. So the trigger activating is on the HMD camera. It's not on the VR rig. But if you're going to teleport somebody, your VR user, if you're going to teleport them, you need to move the VR rig. So the code in here, which moves the whole VR rig from here to over here, it needs to take one more step to understand if it's a VR rig coming through, or it basically needs to not just move the camera. If the camera is the thing that activates it, it needs the camera's parent. It needs to move the camera's parent. And so, if you've designed this for the camera to fly through it and end up over here at the destination, then the script can look the way that we just wrote it. But if it's the VR rig, if it's the HMD camera that trips it in VR, you're going to need to move the camera's parent, the HMD camera's parent. So let's take a look at how you might do that. Right now, this code functions perfectly for the camera, which has no parent. Well, its parent is technically the space. And it worked for those cubes, right? You threw them through, and they ended up on that other location. But right now, it also says CAMPOS. When the cubes go through it, they're called CAMPOS. But I could just generalize this to say OBJPOS. Not that it matters. That the end result is still the same. And I need to change also this to OBJPOS. And now this is agnostic of the camera or not. So let's imagine that we are going to question whether or not it's the VR rig coming through. Well, we can write some if statements. So we could say that if the object coming through, if obj colon get name. Right now, if I want to reserve if the object's name is equal to, and with 2 equals, if it's equal to HMD camera, so in quotes, HMD, exactly how it's spelled over here, HMD camera, then we're going to do something, which is to move the parent. Get rid of this end. We're going to place it around here. And this is what we're going to do if it's not. So if the object's name is HMD camera, then, and we're going to write script in here, But if it's anything else, meaning if it's the camera in the space or it's any boxes, we're going to do this to it. So let's imagine that it's called the HMD camera. What we need to do is basically we can reuse a lot of what we already have. First of all, finding out where that other node is perfect. We will take that. We'll find out where that node is, and so we want that code. So let me just organize that. We'll tab it in. So we want to figure out where node 3 is, and go get the position of that node. This one is interesting because your VR rig node is always basically where the ground plane of your actual physical world. That's like your feet, where your feet will be standing. And so we're going to maybe not do the same calculation as this, but if you were to assume that your VR rig, if you want to actually just place your VR rig at the location of this node, then we just need to get the VR rig's position. So remember that the HMD camera has come through in this piece of code right here. It's the HMD camera that's come through. In here, it's like a box or the regular camera. So up here, what we need to do is get the object's parent node, the VR rig's position. So I would say that basically my obj parent pos is equal to obj is the HMD camera, obj colon get parent node, and that returns the parent node, which is the VR rig, get parent node, and then I can say get world position. And so that's the VR rig world position. So I could say object parent pos, that would be fine. I also just know what I'm dealing with in this case, because if the name is HMD camera that's come through, I know its parent is going to be VR rig. I have set the world up like this. So I can just say that the VR rig, I'm going to call it VR capital R and then lowercase ig, VR rig is equal to HMD camera, which is obj in this case. It's going to be the HMD camera's get parent node, get world position. But this isn't, excuse me. The VR rig position is this. And I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't need to know where the VR rig is. If I want the VR rig to just go straight to where the node is, I just need to set its position. So let's just get a hold of the VR rig. Okay, so the VR rig is actually the HMD's camera get parent node. So obj is the HMD camera in this case. So obj colon get parent node returns this VR rig object. And so now all I need to do is set the world position of VR rig. So VR rig colon set world position. And now I want it to be basically node 3 position. Okay, so just handling a different case here. So if I go through this trigger and I am I'm flying the VR rig around in my HMD camera, my head, my eyes, cross this plane. I want to then jump my VR rig, my parent that contains me, jump that whole thing to the position of node 3, the node 3 pos, which is calculated off of going and getting that node. So that's the destination. Else, if it's not called HMD camera, if it's called pretty much anything else, I'm going to figure out where my destination is. That's the node 3 stuff. I'm going to say just send the object itself to a location plus an offset, that object's position y off that node. Anyway, you're following the logic. If I go into VR mode, I should then I should teleport seamlessly here. See if this works. It's a very fast fly. So if I fly through trigger, something has happened. Aha. We've got an error. campos.y. Aha. It runs this script and it's looking for campos. Aha. I changed that. You remember when I was giving the example and I said objpos, and I changed objpos, objpos.y, objpos.y. I forgot to change one last one here. objpos.y. Let's try this one more time. And now I fly through. Excuse me. When I fly through, let's take a look. We've got an error here, and it's quite simple. And you may have even caught it before I did. VR rig is spelled with a capital R on rig up here, and I forgot to capitalize it here. I'm going to hit escape, escape, capitalize the R, and now it should work. All extremely common things when you're scripting. You're going to get little errors, and you will debug them. There we go. So I've jumped now over to the sphere through the trigger, and super cool. So another fun thing I might do is make my destination. What if I combine this node and this sphere so that I can throw the sphere with this node on it? Imagine I just child this node to that sphere so that the sphere moves, so does that node. And then I go interactions, grabbable fixed, which means that I can now grab it with a laser in VR. And then I take this guy and I'll just bring it over here so I can grab it and decide a destination. So now I come into VR, fly over to this ball, I can pick it up, I'll throw it over there. And then the moment that I come through it, I end up at its location, which is pretty cool. So there you go. There's some interesting teleport stuff you can do in one world. And the last thing I'll show you is kind of the simple, so in the VR 101 video, I explained the way that you can do the teleport locomotion. So if you're familiar with Tilt Brush and some other apps, they like to have you teleport. I'm okay with it. I understand why some people from a motion sickness standpoint want to teleport, but I personally am preferential to our fly locomotion. And so the VR rig preset under VR AR, the preset rig, which I have in the space here, I'll take a look at it here. The VR rig by default has you flying with your left hand, and this is the code for the flying, and it just moves you where you're pointing, and I love it. I can move three-dimensionally. I can move up, move down. I move fast relative to the amount that I'm pressing down the controller, and I can speed that up. So in this world, I'm flying. The default is 4, but I'll crank it up to 24 when I make vast worlds and I want to fly around really fast. I love the fly, and I think that one of the things that causes motion sickness is the perception of a change in velocity over change in time, i.e. acceleration. That's when we expect to feel force. And if you can keep acceleration to a minimum, then the expectation of physical force or kinematic, like a kinesthetic feeling of force on our body is minimized. And so we don't have that kind of disparity between what we're expecting and what we're seeing. And the fly mechanic ramps up really quickly because you speed it up based on the press of your trigger. You are extremely aware, and oftentimes you'll press to full strength, and that means that the actual acceleration ramp is extremely brief, and both going up to full value, full velocity, so meters per second. You get up to the full amount pretty quickly when you squeeze, and then gets it's low when you're not. And so you can kind of see this demonstrated. And then I'm just sitting here justifying why I love the fly mechanic. And when I'm pressing this, and you can actually see the amount that I'm pressing here, it actually moves me in the ramp when I release my finger. That velocity ramp, if I'm moving forward, point back, if I'm moving forward, the actual velocity ramp is really quick. You can even hear the trigger of my Vive controller like snapping tight. And so I prefer this mechanic. When I created it, I was happy about it. Anyway, so if you want to teleport, we have a system enabled for you using Interactions Teleportable 2. And we basically just created Teleportable 2 with this system. Although I'll show you how Teleportable 2 works, and it's just a slight bit different, but it's kind of cool. So let's make like a series of boxes. These will be like I like to think of them as like lily pads, or like I don't know, like stepping stones or something. And then if you go to Interactions and you go to Teleportable 2, and then select these objects, they become teleportable objects that work with the kind of VR interaction system. And in this teleportable, I can now point my laser at it, and my VR rig will move to that location. It'll move to the point based on that object, as if this is a ground pad. And remember, moving the VR rig node, this parent node, is like moving the ground plane of my VR device, VR user. So if you place the VR rig at exactly the ground plane, that's like standing on the ground. When I fly up into the air, I move the VR rig's position and all the things with it. The hands and the headset move with it. So wherever this VR rig node, the top level node, the parent of the hands and the camera, wherever that goes, so goes the experience. So goes the VR person. Their feet, their floor is what you think about that. So the VR rig's floor. So if you're going to stand on something, that's where VR rig wants to be. And you don't have control really over where HMD camera or these where the left hand or right hand goes, because they have a tracked device player controller. The only thing that controls that is the user. If they put their head on the ground, if I put my VR headset on the ground, that's how I control where that HMD goes. So you have to move the VR person around. The only way to move them around is by moving this VR rig. They move forward and back and rotate with their headset. That's their control, but it's all relative to the place on the ground with respect to Y, and then centered on the floor X and Z, where they calibrated their VR system during their setup. And so their play space is kind of represented essentially by some surrounding area. If I move my camera back and up and whatnot, that's all relative to that chosen calibrated center point. Anyway, so what that means is that when I'm moving the VR rig, and I want like basically the new ground location to be, that's what's happening in like a teleportation. I'm saying move that to a new ground plane. And if you wanted the eyes to be in a particular position, you would need to sort of maybe offset that VR rig's location to some assumed amount, but you never know whether your user is going to be sitting or standing. So you would need to kind of build a little bit of that logic into your own show. So let's take a look at Teleportable 2. If I go into VR and laser over Teleportable 2, I'm going to click it and it's going to jump me there. How does it work? Well, let's do it first, and then I'll kind of show you what's under the hood there. So I now kind of have these lily pads in essence, and let's say I deleted the fly node, or I used a so that I don't have that. Now I want to do is teleport. So I'm going to use the interact, which is the grip trigger, and when I grip trigger over, I think there's a little bit of logic in here in Teleportable 2 that like brings you just slightly back from your laser. So if like that's your point of interest, like way out there, I don't go exactly out there. I don't think. Well, no, because yeah, this is the center of my space. We'll see in the code exactly where it places you, but I think it's just ever so slightly back from the location that you press. But the idea being that no matter it's not just the object itself, like its center. It's like it's any place on that plane, and it has to be on the top plane of this object, I think. Yeah, so I can set that, and you can put that on a whole like mesh. Like I could actually put that on a koala and teleport around the koala. But the other thing that you could do is, let's say you made one of these really big. I'll just lock this one down. Give it no rigid body. So now this becomes like a whole teleportable arena. So if you made like a whole kind of ground mesh that you wanted your VR person to traverse, this would be a great way to do it. So if you like the teleportation, to your heart's content, use one of these, either sort of this like mega system for teleportation, and then these little lily pad system as well, which is pretty cool. You could have waypoints in an experience where you kind of move onward. And what's kind of cool too is that if you don't want this to be like for example, if I don't want this one to be teleportable too, I can make its interactability, like I can turn it off, and then if I pass a test here, then it makes this one teleportable, which is kind of cool. So then you can pass a test here and then make this one teleportable, which I think is kind of cool. Yeah, if you're actually seeing Discord pop up here, it kind of lives over. Symmetry, our Discord channel chat is actually taking place up here, which is cool to see. People engaging. Yeah. So we've got teleport in a number of different ways. We can teleport and kind of set ourselves into like a really specific position. We can add a little offset to that, and we can also use this system for teleportation that's kind of meant more for locomotion than for like an overall effect. You can also package up an object and make it grabbable, and so I'll show you that grabbability. I mean, which we basically did here for the ball, where we threw our destination, but we can also take our our trigger and make it like not just static in place, but I can also put it somewhere where it becomes movable, which is pretty cool because as an example, let's build this thing so I can move it around. Basically, I'm gonna basically combine these into one object, these two walls. But first I want to actually kind of make them directional. So I'm going to add one entity, which is like we'll call this like the back side. So these will be black. And then, so that'll be exit. I'm going to clone them, holding down Control, now releasing, holding down Alt, then holding down Shift to pull these things forward in that direction. Then I'm going to color these ones white as if that's the entrance. And now I'm going to pull the trigger out for just a second. I'm going to hit Control D, and I've fused these now into a single object, which is great. And then I can add interactable, grabbable fixed to this object. And then I've got this new thing which I'll call this, instead of just mesh entity, I'll call it like portal. Just so I remember that it's grabbable, I'm just writing grabbable on it, portal grabbable. Very cool. And then if I want to put the trigger, childing the trigger to portal grabbable. So I'm going to child it to portal grabbable and then kind of move it back into place, holding Shift. The last thing I want to make sure is, like I said before, if I ever have triggers kind of intersecting static objects or things that are going to get thrown, I just want to make sure that that object itself is also not trigger activating. So just get rid of trigger activating on that. And now I've got this portal that's a fused set of objects. It could be this, it could be, a box that I've created, it could be it could be a koala, and I could be like traveling into its ear, come in one ear and out the other, which that seems kind of hilarious. Maybe I'll do that next. Or like go in his mouth and out somewhere else. But the main thing is that it's grabbable, interactive. It's not trigger activating. It's got the trigger carrying with it on its, the trigger is going with it. And I have a sense of which side is the inward side. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to color my destination sphere. So I've got, what do I have here? I've got, on this sphere, I've got like a, this is node 3. Node 3 is the location of where anything that goes through here is going to pop out at node 3. And I can also throw the ball carrying node 3 around. So I can now move the destination and the source teleport, and which is cool. So if I go into VR, I'll be able to grab this item and move it around. I also have this thing over here, which is an emitter that's emitting spheres, which is also grabbable in VR, so I can move it around. And now I can potentially move, spray these things into that teleportation. I just want to see, yeah, they do have some velocity. There you go. So, I'm going to go into VR, and we'll see how this works. So, I have kind of this little grip that's like shooting things, and I can bring it to the trigger, and they're now popping out over here, which is kind of cool. And what's cool is that they actually, you can kind of see this, but they carry the physics goes with them. This thing's still on its upward trajectory, and it ends up on its upward trajectory, stays on its upward trajectory up there. I think if I aim this down, yeah, they should be coming down and out the portal. So this itself is kind of interesting possible game mechanic where you could use, what if I have to control other objects through a portal? So I have to use the portal to like speak over to my, other objects. And so you have to sort of like begin to map this, this kind of these dimensions to those dimensions. And that could be interesting. So I can also take this, move this somewhere else. What happens? This might screw things up drastically. So this thing's going to try to move to where node 3 is. Node 3 is on it. That could go into that could crash the system, couldn't it? Or does it? Another thing about triggers that's kind of cool is that you don't have to throw things through them. You can also just wave things over them. I can't even get inside that one. It's too big. I don't think it knows what to do with that. Let's see here. Things over here. Let's just give me another idea, which is like, imagine you've got I got my spheres going out there. Imagine you have to send portals through portals. I don't think I can fit either of these portals through these portals. Let's give that a shot. I'm just gonna like select this item and I'm just gonna scale it up. And then get the trigger and scale it up. Whoa, to about there. Go into VR. So now I have this kind of mega trigger thing. And if I want that, I've still got my earlier teleports. So imagine if I want to go from here. Oops. If I want to go from here into this thing, and I want this thing to be far out that way. Let's imagine that let's say I can't actually grab and move that. Well, yeah, I can. So this is my destination ball. And then when this thing, I don't think this thing's actually trigger activating. I'm going to make this object trigger activating. Okay. So, that's where I want to end up. The way that I'm going to get there is by having this it's too big. Is it really? Still too big. Come back. So I can send portals. Can I? What is going on? Oh. That fused object did not like being scaled. I'm going to redo this. I'm going to Shift Control D, unfuse it. Refuse it. Remove its trigger activating. Add the trigger to it. Aha! I think what happened is it didn't send my full object. I made this little node trigger activating in here, so I'm just going to make this one trigger activating. The trick is I don't want to accidentally trigger my own self in here. So I'm going to make the trigger inside of this just a little bit smaller. I'm going to make node B not trigger activating. And I'm going to make this, the actual box, trigger activating. So now this box should be trigger activating, and it should work just like our code in here. Our code in this trigger, which is a sorry, I can't grab the. It's not HMD camera coming through, so it works just like those other cubes, which means that it's actually going to just get the position of that object. And if I want to take this whole trigger and everything with it, I need to take the parent node, just like the HMD. And so an easy way to do that is to make the top level trigger activating and then send it. In the VR instance, I made a child node inside of it, right? The camera, the HMD camera. And then I had to run a different line of code that was like, go get its parent and move its parent. And I could do that as well. And I could test for is its name a box. But I think this should work. Because now what I'm doing is I'm treating it like just any other box, and the trigger activating is on the parent or the box itself. So I throw out my destination sphere, and I bring my portal, koala portal, and send it through. Come on. Oh, it's still movable. Excuse me. I need to make this object not movable. And that will allow me to go through its center. A number of things. But now this should go through. There you go. But it ended up quite right with my destination sphere. It's interesting. Maybe it's that offset. Oh, it takes the offset of the, yeah. No, I think it does fine. It was just, that one's not trigger activating. Oh, it bounced over. So that was way out there. So this is a different one, and we'll teach you this another time, but super cool. Flips you upside down. So this one is, when we go over to the koala one is upside down, and this is a portal that I set up in one way where it like rotates me to be in the orientation of into the orientation of the frame of reference of the other object, of the other portal. So this one is right side up, isn't it? Oh, it's my sending box that's upside down. Yeah, this one's upside down. So we don't have really a way of knowing, but I'm now upside down. I guess you can easily see that I'm not standing on my head, but I also thought this was super cool. That like if one is upside down and one is not, I'm gonna end up flipping upside down, right side up. So now I'm upside down. This seems also like really right for a game. I could grab here. I love this. This is cool. Now I'm sideways. You could try to figure out how to get out of these. Right side up. What a trip. I was told once that if you wear upside down glasses for a day, that your vision will flip. I'm very curious about that. Well, cool. So I'm going to end here upside down. Hanging out like a bat. And it's kind of a lot of fun, different things with portals. This is interesting. Wow. Okay. Yep. Portals and upside downness. So, the big takeaways, setting the position of the VR rig, or a default camera, or an object. You'll need to test, potentially, what it is that's coming through the trigger, to know how you want to deal with it. So just as we did in this trigger, we, tested whether or not the thing coming through, the trigger activatable thing, the thing that activates the trigger is going to come in as OBJ, so you can always test its name, and if it is a certain thing in your world that you want to do something different with, you can send it, different directions. In one case, we needed to move the parent. That was the VR rig. We needed to move the parent of the HMD camera, because the parent of the HMD camera is the VR rig. And in the other one, we said if it's a camera or an object, basically if it's not anything other than an HMD camera, send it to the exact, or send it to a point with an offset. But you could run all kinds of logic in your portal, and you could, like we've done in a prior lesson, you could filter for different types of things and send them to different locations. We did this with bumpers in an earlier lesson, and we bounced different colored spheres based on their color. Could kind of like filter things out, but we could send things in all different directions. We could also ask like what how many points has the player like achieved at this point, or how far along are we in the time, and or what's the musical pitch of the song or something, and kind of teleport them to different locations. You could have a song or a narrative that people have to step through the portal at a certain time to get to another location. You could have something spinning, this dynamic destination. So a sphere that you can throw, that we did where we threw it and then went to it, or these boxes you can throw around. You could have something that you don't control but is getting moved around in the space, and you need to teleport, to it at a particular time. And that is what enables you to kind of cross through a different level. So a lot of things you can do with the teleport, and enjoy kind of the effect of it when you're in in VR, because it is pretty cool to kind of like to jump to different locations, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of kind of creativity from that. And a challenge might be to get rid of fly on your hand and just use kind of this little teleport system, using the interactions teleportable too, and see if you can't set up a teleport that you can go only through the teleport, but you have to do it at a certain moment to get to the other side. And or potentially you use elements like this to cross a chasm. So all right, look forward to